Good morning, folks. This is Perry Mallory, Human Services Supervisor, standing in for Ann Deacon. It is our CSC committee meeting for the 19th of November. Ann was unable to be here. She is chairing a statewide meeting this morning and asked if I would step in and be able to share some information in terms of the Crisis Stabilization Center updates. There's quite a bit of activity going on. I will make every attempt to answer questions as I've shared a bit of information for folks, or obviously I will document the questions and make sure and get back to folks if that's necessary. I guess I'll begin with, I wasn't sure exactly where to start. There's a number of different components obviously occurring relative to the Crisis Stabilization Center. The open house and ribbon cutting is being scheduled as a video. It will be available for viewing, obviously, in an ongoing way. There'll be a virtual tour that's being scheduled at this point. I don't know that it's been solidified yet, but Ann Deacon is planning on being providing the guided commentary of the facility. Additionally, as it occurs, elected speeches and comments and so forth will be videoed for ongoing review. So that's the plan at this point relative to the open house and ribbon cutting. The actual official scheduled opening at this point is for the 4th of January, 2021. There are, of course, a number of components that are in play relative to that. The certificate of occupancy is being the steps are being completed to accomplish that. That involves the Department of Health and the Fire Marshal. Final construction is occurring. Furniture assembly and installation is actually occurring at the facility. There's some detail of accessibility barrier checklists and emergency evacuation plans that need to be finalized, and those are being moved forward. And also the providers completing final steps of their certification processes. But I am aware of no obstacles at this point. A lot of different things have come up, and so it's possible, but really, given the sophistication of what's needed to go on here recently, that is moving forward pretty smoothly. We have, I've actually been involved pretty specifically in terms of completing lease agreements, and there are contingent memos of understanding that have been drafted and reviewed pretty intensely by both of the providers at this point. So we are just really near the finalization of those documents. At this point, the two providers, if folks will recall, is Pioneer Human Services providing the withdrawal management services, and Compass Health that is providing the mental health stabilization services. The intent at this point is for Pioneer Human Services to have a move-in scheduled on the 15th of December. They are also involved in the kitchen services and providing meals, etc. So they are interested in getting into the building a bit early to prepare and to train staff to make sure that the kitchen is set up, those kinds of things. Also, at this point, Compass Health is scheduled for move in on the 2nd. They're very involved, obviously, but actual official move in on the 2nd because for one component, meals wouldn't be able to be provided from the kitchen for clients prior to Pioneer Human Services being prepared for that. And the goal at this point is that clients will be moved from the existing triage facility into the Crisis Stabilization Center on Monday the 4th, with plans for a gradual startup and move to full capacity at this point. Just as a sort of a reminder, Compass Health continues their negotiation with the managed care organizations right now because we're interested in reimbursement to sustain both voluntary and involuntary admission. That involuntary admission is that for law enforcement, 12-hour holds. That is our goal and intent. And so funding plays a role in that in terms of the necessary staffing levels for an involuntary ability. Pioneer Human Services is prepared to open, and as part of the contractual obligation, as a American Society of Addiction Medicine level 3.7, which the short version of that is that it's a medically monitored withdrawal management program, certainly more significant than the social detox that has occurred up to this point in time. So we're excited about that. So just to detail that, we've remained in communication with Compass Health regarding their negotiations with the managed care organizations. There's 5 of them, if you will recall, and they have a variety of sort of positions relative to funding and the components of that, which is absolutely crucial. And at this point, what we're of course pursuing is cost reimbursement 24/7, 365 for adults in need of those services. So that's the thumbnail sketch of what's happening at the Crisis Stabilization Center. If there is additional information that I can provide, I'd be more than happy to do so. Yes, Todd.
That's great. The cost reimbursement, how far are we, or just operating costs generally, how far are we to more certainty about having operating being fully funded? I know there was the issue of people who didn't qualify for Medicaid funds or Medicare. I always get this mixed up. So is that all still being navigated?
It is, absolutely. And right now, the primary component of that is the negotiations that Compass Health is having with the managed care organizations who are, responsible for the Medicaid reimbursement. And also, being able to bring the detail to them of, I think the important components of that, of course, are how that will benefit the managed care organizations. Is a fair amount of pressure, that is occurring in regards to that reimbursement. And so it's slow and tedious, but it is absolutely progressing forward. And at least from my perception, Compass Health certainly has the ability and also the presence in the region to be able to effectively negotiate with the managed care organizations. Whether or not the managed care organizations will agree for this cost reimbursement, that is what remains to be seen. The original challenge was that the thought process was each of the managed care organizations would essentially reimburse for their clients and their clients only, which would of course not address the facility being open for a 24-hour, 365 period. So I don't have any specific news about that at this point, other than there's a fair amount of legislation pressure and other processes that are going on to support that, and that we certainly have hopes and have been very specific in our communication and even within the body of the lease agreement, with the expectation that the funding, which of course is more significant for the involuntary admit, and the necessary staff. Yes, Stephen.
Hi, Ferry. Thank you for that report. I don't know why I'm only.
Your audio is not real strong, Stephen.
I'm sorry. Is that any better? It's
Can
up
hear
as
you.
loud as I can, loud as I can get it. Sorry. Um, Perry, what provisions are there for COVID protocols for people coming in, and how are the providers planning for possible positive tests on staff?
Yeah, it's a great question. Always obviously a concern. They have implemented processes at the triage facility at this point in time. One of the advantages, as it were, is that the same providers that had provided services in the triage facility will also be providing services in the crisis stabilization center. And so, to my knowledge, they are doing a standard admission, a review of individuals and symptomology. They are, taking temperature and doing vitals and those kinds of things at this point. I don't know that I can answer that with any greater detail in terms of what the response, if an individual has the possibility of actually being positive for COVID at this point. But I do know that testing in the county has really grown leaps and bounds in terms of accessibility and also the time frame in which an individual can be tested and that we can get the results of that. Additionally, the other advantage that we have to the Crisis Stabilization Center over the triage facility is that there are individual rooms. And the HVAC system is set up, actually exceeds the recommendations of the Department of Health in regard to filtering systems and so forth. And so there are some options also for individuals that are potential and those kinds of pieces. And so I know that that isn't actually something that I've been involved in specific discussions of the protocol and procedure at this point, but it's a great point that I know that they've been thinking about and have been more involved in sort of the structural pieces in some of the meetings. And we'll bring that up because I have another meeting scheduled with the group. It's not always about protocol and procedure. It's a lot about the sort of nuts and bolts of getting moved and, et cetera. But I am in contact with the directors of both PHS and Compass Health, so can certainly pose that question of what are your protocols, and they obviously have them written out, so I'm sure I can get a copy of that as well.
Hey, Perry, just a little bit on that, Mike Hilly. Generally what's going to happen when any patient comes in that facility, they're going to get a medical screening. So whether they come in by EMS or law enforcement, or they walk in, on their own, they'll be intercepted by a nurse. And that's one of the conversations we're trying to sort out now, is that would there be a nurse for both Compass and, both Pioneer and Compass, or could one nurse do it for both organizations when they come in that door? I could imagine that easily they would be able to screen for COVID at that point. Everybody going to the emergency department is screened for COVID right out the gate. And some of those turnaround times for test results have been, just a couple of hours. So, and that's with the PCR test. The rapid tests, they could use at the door as well, but it has a little bit less of a, specific for the COVID. It's a 50-50 thing really for the rapid test. But some of the conversations I heard was they would be able to do that test right at the door on that medical break-in. So you get you get your temperature taken, get the screening form that you would fill out, a contact form. Have you been anybody around and screen in there? I have a question, Perry, back to the beginning of your conversation about the opening and the ribbon cutting. Would it be a possibility to maybe sometime create a little video recording of that? It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but one of the things, as I talk to the physicians over at the ED and of course EMS, they have a sort of an idea of the current center and how it's operating. And, we're explaining that, no, this will be a much higher level facility with nursing, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it'd be really valuable if we could record that and package that, and then I can push that out to our EMTs, paramedics, and physicians over at the ED, so that they know what that facility looks like, because it sounds like we're not going to be able to actually physically walk through that in any manner in this soon. So I just want, can we do that? Yeah.
Yep, nope, it's a great point. And actually, that's something that Ann is working on now. The county has utilized a videographer up to this point in time, quite a bit of skill in this particular area. And so they're actually scheduling that for the virtual walkthrough and in addition, elected speeches and those kinds of things, so that it continues to be available for exactly what you're talking about, and or, you know, at any point in time, community viewing. It'll be posted. I'm not certain exactly where, but we'll make certain that the posting is available for community if they have, you know, questions about that, and then walking through the detail of the staffing levels, you know, obviously showing the building, you know, and those components of just sort of a walking in. I suspect a walking in here is the reception area, and then, you know, off we go through the two sides of the facility. So we'll be definitely available for you to provide out there to those folks that you see as appropriate. Mike, thanks.
Very real quick. You mentioned at the beginning that the plan was to transition folks that are currently in the triage center over to the crisis stabilization. Do you know, is triage currently being used at their full capacity? Or I know the numbers change on a day-to-day basis, but do you have any idea, is that facility full right now and those people will be coming over?
To my knowledge, Doug, they are actually at a reduced capacity because of the layout of the building. I'm going to talk about detox, and I believe that it's absolutely true for the mental health stabilization side as well. They've reduced that capacity just in regard to COVID concerns, because the layout of the building, as you well know, does not support separation of individuals, even within the 6 feet necessary to their bays, as opposed to individual rooms. And so my last recollection in that component was that they were operating at a 50% capacity. And so, but I can actually find out about that as well. And I know that there are some components to this, but as appropriate, I can send information to Jill and in regard to any questions that folks are asking, and make sure that some details are provided back to folks. But I'm relatively certain that I'm accurate in regards to the 50% capacity at this point, which will be able to have a greater capacity, you know, the buildup of that, again, because of the individualized rooms and the HVAC system. We got into quite a bit of specific discussion with the architect around the HVAC system and the filtering and et cetera. And again, discovered that it actually exceeds the recommendations that the CDC is offering or recommending at this point in time. So, so that's the information that I have.
Good.
Hi, Perry. My hand was up, but that's okay. I prefer not using hands. I just read the agenda to do it. I had a couple of questions. And first, Doug, anecdotally, Perry can give you probably the official answer. I can tell you anecdotally, the sense in the recovery community is detox is very difficult to access right now because of COVID. So I can tell you that the rumors are that it's just really hard to get in because capacity is reduced. Of course, Perry can tell you exactly what's happening from a policy perspective, but I know that I keep hearing, I think it's a little egregious, but you know, people are dying. There's these huge mental health things. Everybody wants to blame COVID, and there's some elements of truth in that. But one of the things that comes up is the resources that we normally have don't have the capacity that people were accustomed to. My first question, Perry, I don't know if you know the answer, but I'm assuming that the facility can't open till the city of Bellingham, I assume it's the city of Bellingham, gives what I would call a certificate of occupancy or whatever they call the ability to go in. Is that your understanding as well?
It is, and there's a couple of different components to this. And I think that the architect actually, because they've obviously done this with some other facilities, brings the entities together. That is the state fire marshal, the Department of Health in some of the application process that occur there, and also the fire marshal from the city of Bellingham. My understanding is that the biggest challenge is actually the state fire marshal. Getting the individual there and being able to do a review of the necessary components, fire suppression and some of those pieces, and that the city of Bellingham fire marshal really sort of has that pathway cleared by virtue of the state fire marshal. That's my understanding of it at this point, but does play definitely a role.
Okay, because last we heard, or I heard, that the barrier was more with City of Bellingham Fire Marshal than state. So that sounds like it's reversed, but still, ultimately, I suppose the City of Bellingham doesn't give that certificate of occupancy until the other entities are satisfied, and likely it can't open until Department of Health gives whatever licensure they give to say the facility is approved. So I guess my question is, maybe not with a litany of lists, but like when I'm trying to get a building approved for a CO or certificate of occupancy, I'm looking at, all right, what's my barriers? How can I, and it's just a punch list. How real, I mean, are we going to hit our open date? Can people go in on the 15th? I mean, are we, how bad's the list, between us and getting that certificate of occupancy?
Right. And so at least in the discussions that we have had, and again, I didn't realize this, but the architect and his staff are just essential in this, and their relationships with the state fire marshal and DOH and that sort of thing. And I've certainly posed the same question of, is there anything I can do, or is there any support that you need in order to accomplish the final components of this certificate of occupancy? And he has assured us that no, it's on track. It's within the timeframes that are expected, and certainly within the projected move-in dates and opening date. It's doable. He certainly presents with confidence. And thus far, to be honest, my observation has been that with the deadlines, the other deadlines that have needed to occur, that those have in fact occurred as well. I can't recall specifically, but if I remember, there was actually some interaction on this level this week with the architect and those other entities. I know that he has a very close relationship with the Department of Health and the entities that are key and responsible there, and that they're actually doing a virtual process, which is a little bit less involved than I believe the fire marshal review is an in-person review. And again, I'm almost certain that was actually scheduled for this week.
Okay, no, I mean, you've answered the basic question, because obviously we don't open if the city doesn't approve, but my basic concern is I wanted to make sure the city of Bellingham was still doing all they could to kind of make sure that there weren't any unnecessary barriers. And it sounds like they're still there. I understand the COVID situation makes lots of things more time consuming and more difficult, but it doesn't sound like there's much we or others can do to help that process, that it's all that what can be done is being done. And that was the impetus of my question.
Yeah, the two key documents, I mean, other than obviously completing the necessary functions of the fire suppression and so forth, were an emergency evacuation plan that needed to be actually established for that building for both of the providers, that it's posted, that they have it in their policy and procedure, and et cetera, and that document is approved. And those have been submitted for approval. And I think that's part and parcel to their discussion this week. And also the accessibility barrier checklist, which is kind of interesting because basically the providers have to walk through with the architect and just ensure, and sort of there's a existing template form that's checked off, that it's been verified that in fact, any accessibility barrier issues have been addressed. So those are the really two sort of sophisticated tools that are used. And I initially work with the two providers to bring those documents together, provided them to the architect, who then passed it on to Department of Health. So I know those forms and processes have been completed. If anything is going to come up, I think that it's going to come up this week, which of course gives us time to be able to respond to it and resubmit and et cetera.
Well, and the reason I'm asking is you're really only about 3 weeks from Pioneer trying to move in. I don't know if they can move in for a certificate of occupancy for training. I don't know. But they're with, you got Thanksgiving week. Today's the 19th. And so I'm looking at my calendar. It's coming up pretty quick. I mean,
Right.
maybe they can go in there without that occupancy. Maybe, I don't know.
You know, I don't believe so. I believe that, I know that the way that it was explained to me is right now the building is the property of Tiger Construction.
Right.
And it has to do with them, their liability and et cetera, of where the building then becomes the property of the county.
Right.
At that same time that occupancy, a certificate of occupancy is provided. And so the intent at the last discussion that I was involved in was that certificate of occupancy would be available before the 15th of December.
Okay.
Because they can't move in.
That's what I was afraid of. And then you have Thanksgiving week. So I'm seeing 10, 11, maybe 13, 14 business days until that date.
Yes.
The worst 2 months to get anything done with certificates of occupancy are August and between now and Christmas.
Right.
So, all right.
In a non-COVID year.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. In a non-COVID year. Yeah, it's true. People probably aren't on vacation. Well, who knows where people are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for answering all the questions, and hopefully they get it in time and Pioneer can move in on the 15th.
Well, and I'm making, notes for it again, however it's appropriate to share this information, but getting more detail to this for this committee so that they have that information as well.
Yeah, if you could tell Ann, I mean, it's a huge benchmark to get that CO. So if
Yes.
that would be an email I'd love to see. So if you get it, if you could let us know, that would be awesome. And if there's anything any of us can do, I'm sure. But it sounds like everybody who can help is motivated to help, and that's all you can ask for.
Yep. Got it.
Thank you.
I was here to guarantee the move-in date.
Yeah, no, not at all. I never guarantee dates anymore.
Oh, thank you, Tyler. Yeah, that's great.
Rob and I did say that we're likely to get our temporary CO today. I just texted him. So Perry, confirm with Rob and Rusty and send something out to the group about it. But yeah, sounds like temporary today.
That's awesome, Tyler.
Yep.
You should turn on your camera and come in more often.
Yeah, I'm tuning in. I just turned my camera off.
Well, we've been talking about this, how long. Yeah, so it's good to hear that occupant. I just worried that if they didn't have it, they couldn't do what they needed to do.
Yep, absolutely. It's a really good. Thanks.
I experienced the same thing in talking with the architect, because it's like, nope, I've got this. And it's like, I don't know, there's something internally for me that isn't, I'm still anxious. Help me with my anxiety. And that's where it sort of stayed. I don't have any other specific information, and did make reference to the gradual startup to reaching full capacity, just making sure systems are working and so forth. She didn't give a specific time frame for that, but that was an understanding with the two providers at this point. I know also, for what it's worth, that Pioneer Human Services is meeting on the 24th. I believe it is either the 23rd, Monday or Tuesday of next week, to go through required training for the appliances in the kitchen, and that is actually a component of assuming the responsibility. There's quite a bit of equipment and safety equipment and so forth that's a part of that, you can imagine. So those are the other components. And boy, I have to say that one of the things that I'm really pleased about and want to continue to work with is that the two providers are communicating with each other very regularly on a variety of topics, furniture and just how phone systems and call-ins are going to work and those kinds of things, which is absolutely essential. And to be honest, at least from my perspective, they worked more in isolation in the triage facility, which created some problems. And so they've understood in the get-go of this, and have certainly demonstrated and presented that that interaction and work on the director level, as well as even the upper structure level of those two providers. So that's a great thing to see at this point, because it's going to be absolutely essential to the success overall of the Crisis Stabilization Center.
Hey, Perry, just one more quick question. I know in the last meeting, Ann had brought up Compass was struggling with some of their staffing issues related to dealing with people that were had some behavioral issues to maintain that voluntary option or involuntary option. I'm sorry. Is that still moving forward with Compass and they're addressing that?
There are a number of discussions, and without going into too much detail, one of the things that Ann had directed me to do in writing the lease agreement, so it's sort of an interesting dynamic that we, the county, if you will, are the landlords, but we do not reimburse and compensate for services, which is that used to be true. The funding used to come through the county. It came from the state through the county, and the providers were reimbursed via the county. That changed, but my point being that historically was true. Now, the fact that we are not a payor created a bit of a challenge, because we absolutely want to be a significant presence and leadership relative to services, the quality of services, the consistency, the protocol and procedure of that, yet don't pay for the service. And so Ann had me create the lease agreement with some references to obligations that the providers had in terms of services and expected services, but that was fairly general. And then I also created a memo of understanding that is contingent on the lease agreement, and failure to follow through with that, and et cetera. You can imagine, sort of how that legal work with the help of obviously the legal office of the county. And so that memo of understanding is actually unique for both Pioneer Human Services and Compass Health. And one of the components is having staff and availability and protocols and procedures for involuntary admission. And that, as we had discussed, the sort of remaining key component is going to be the financial aspect, the fiscal aspect, and that being the managed care organizations are going to play a significant role in that, in order for the provider to remain, solvent. And so that is what we are absolutely dialing into and focusing on, of step by step how Compass Health is doing in regards to those negotiations, and in writing, as they haven't signed it off yet, but it's been reviewed several times, the MOU and the lease agreement being having that expectation literally written out in them, as well as things you can imagine, support for EMS, for law enforcement, for understanding that particular component. So I hope I'm answering your question, Doug, in regard to that. But it is a primary concern for us, and it's been verbalized and written. At this point, the feedback that I've gotten from both Pioneer Human Services and Compass Health is that they are in agreement with the lease agreement and with the MOU. They did some pushback, to be honest, not to be unexpected, but they did some pushback in regard to the involvement of the county in the advisory board, in recommendations for levels of care. But I think that's going to be absolutely essential with the elements that are involved of the hospital, the law enforcement, EMS, and the community. So I feel hopeful, and that's why I was honestly making reference to the interaction that they have had with each other and the communication that they've had with each other, because it's going to be absolutely essential as well. We don't want EMS or anyone else that is bringing a individual to the facility to have to figure out whether they go to one side or the other. We want the facility working simultaneously with each other to make that decision. And if a transition from withdrawal management to mental health stabilization needs to occur, that simply occurs. That's not the concern of of the community members. That's the concern of the facility itself, and is going to require that. So I feel hopeful. I don't know what the managed care organizations, of course, are going to conclude. They're in a business, and they're looking at their bottom line and those kinds of components. I know that Anne has done an immense amount of work bringing information specifically to them around how this will save funds and resources for the managed care organizations, and again that they're getting a fair amount of pressure from a number of entities to not do business as usual, but instead to look at the unique needs and expectations of our community.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. I know, obviously, from the get-go, the initial intent was to have that as involuntary was an option for that facility. So sounds like it's still in process.
Absolutely, and I'm excited to be a part of that, to be honest, because it is a really significant challenge, as you know, not only from a staffing standpoint, but of course, from a licensure and that kind of piece. But honestly, the powers that be, and Compass Health in particular, of course, is the challenge that they're working through with the managed care organizations. Very knowledgeable staff, in this regard, and what needs to occur and what the funding will need to be and so forth. So I feel confident about their knowledge, and also the period of time that it honestly took in negotiations to have them understand this is not an option. This is a goal that we are going to reach, and the county is going to continue to be involved in that. So it's great to be a part of it, because it's going to be pretty amazing as it formulates together.
Thanks.
Saw that Jill had put up our agenda. If you wouldn't mind, Jill, thank you so much. I think that we've moved through. Thank you for the questions in regards to the Crisis Stabilization Center updates, and I will again endeavor to provide that information, and we have a bit. At this point, we are to, I think, other business. Nothing actually specifically listed there, but certainly want to open it to the committee to offer if there's anything to offer.
It's not really other business, Perry, but if we could get, well, actually, Jill normally takes the minutes, come to think of it. I was just thinking, making sure for the full task force that they have a couple paragraphs just giving a snapshot of where we are today, and that should make the report at the December meeting easier, if just, for people to know. But I was going to say for you to do it, but I think, Jill, you do that, and you do that, right, from the minutes.
I do summaries, but yes, there's not a task force meeting in December.
Oh, there isn't. Okay, I got confused. All right, so we're going monthly starting in January.
In January, there is a steering committee in December.
Okay. We might want to send these minutes. I'll talk with Stephen, but I think there's enough interest because since we're not meeting till January, the grand opening will be likely before we meet. It may be prudent to send these minutes out early. I'll talk with Stephen about it, but I think there's other task force members that would like the update of where we are. And Perry, your synopsis was excellent. Thank you. And I think that would answer most people's questions. Stephen, does that make sense to send it out ahead of time?
Yeah, that would be my feeling exactly, Jack. I don't know that there's a lot to talk about. I would say let's send it out so that people get that heads up. So
maybe, Jill, once your minutes are done, if you could have Perry look at them and make sure that draft looks right, and maybe we just send it out, say, hey, good news, Crisis Stabilization is moving forward. Estimated grand opening is, and here's the minutes from the meeting. I think that would be good news for people.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. Coincidentally, it was discussed at the last steering committee of having the next task force meeting on January 4th. That sounds like it's the same day as the grand opening.
Well, maybe we could do a live Zoom, we could participate remotely. All right. That was sort of tongue in cheek, but we could give 10 minutes if they were out there to do that. I have one of those big pair of scissors that Barbara Brenner gave me. They were about this tall. So if you need some, I'm serious. I got the red ribbon and they're this tall. We have them at the real estate office. And if Barbara was contagious, it was years ago. So we should be safe now.
Hey,
All right.
small
Go
question,
ahead, Mike.
Gary. Just curious if there's going to be any sort of marketing materials put out once we get closer to opening, maybe a one-pager or brochure or something that we can push out to the public, just describing the center and the services and what's going on.
It's a great question. I don't know. Anne may have given thought to this already, and so I will check with her. But it makes absolute sense, a web page at a bare minimum, to do a description and so forth. So I will check on that and probably get assigned to do it once I check on it, to be honest with you.
Sorry about that, Perry. I didn't say nothing.
No, I love my job. It's a little bit challenging relative to working remotely at times, but I love my work and it's very exciting, and I'm hoping to overwhelm Anne so that she can't retire during the time frame that she's estimating, but I'll let that go for another time.
Yeah, Perry, I think a website, even if it's kind of basic, that includes for the public how to access the services that way all of us can steer people to it when we're asked questions. So go to the website, and that's how it tells you how to access services and some pictures. And I think it's a great idea.
And that's same for me, Perry. That's sort of my viewpoint. I'd love to be able to stuff a single card in all the medic units and all the EMT units. They're frequently engaging people out there, but not necessarily taking them anywhere. And you can hand them that card and say, hey, if this is the day for you, here's how you get there. We'll even give you a ride if you want, but maybe it's another day. Something to hand out to people.
Right. Right. We certainly have the information, so it'd just be about literally designing that.
Perry, this is Stephen. I would add a website is great, but it's pretty passive. You have to go to it. So I'd look for something that pushes out to the general public. I won't say anything about the Herald, but it's what we got, and other ways that we could distribute that information more widely.
Understood. All right. Thank you for those thoughts and ideas, good thoughts and ideas as well. Jill, I will also forward you my sort of bullet points that I shared this morning so that you just have that information available to you.
Thank you.
If there is no other business, we can move to public comment.
We have one attendee with us today. If that person would like to speak to the committee, it looks like you're joined by phone. You can press *9 on your phone to raise your hand. Please do so now. And there are no hands raised.
All right. Well, I appreciate the support of everyone for my standing in and information. Obviously, filling Ms. Deacon's shoes, I would never even attempt to do. But I very much appreciate the support and the support that's really been ongoing. Very exciting stuff and moving very quickly. So if there is no other interest in information, I will adjourn.
Thanks, Perry.
All right.